For this tutorial, we're going to take the WEHeroes app, which is a fantastic app made by Giovanna and Arlen, our fantastic alumni that worked on this app a couple of years ago. What the WEHeroes app is about, it's about the IUCN Red List, which is a website that shows endangered species around the world. Giovanna and Arlen made an app that allowed you to see some information about the count of different endangered species in different parts in the world. And they did this using an API or an application programming interface. Part of their first tutorial that they made around this app was showing you how to use an API. And what we're going to do with this now is we're going to add to their tutorial. And what we're going to do with their app is add to it by using the IUCN API to get a little more information about particular species. And then we're going to use a chatbot in App Inventor to take the language that is written. And then what we're going to do with the information that comes back is use generative AI or a chatbot component in App Inventor to rewrite the content to be more age appropriate. So it's very scientific, the information that comes back from the IUCN. And what we want to do is make it more accessible to people who are younger. So to start with this, what I'm going to do is load this app into App Inventor. So their project is accessible here. This is their app, the WEHeroes app. It consists of 3 different screens. So screen 1 is the login screen. They use Firebase to allow users to sign up and then log in. And then screen 3 is just creating a new account. So if you go back to screen 1, if you don't have an account, you can go to sign in, and then that will take you to screen 3, which allows you to create your new account. And then the main part of the app is this map and regions. What they've done is they've created some different regions. So the IUCN, if we look at their API documentation, they have different regions of the world. So here's this region list that we'll see. And note that they've divided up areas of the world into different regions. And that's what Giovanna and Arlen did here. They just chose ones for example. So they've got global, which would be the entire world, the Mediterranean, Central Africa, and Northern Africa. And so the idea is that you can click on any one of these buttons and it will give you basically a count of the number of threatened species. And that was just one piece of what the API will return. If we go back to the IUCN, they've got lots of different things that you can find out. So they started with the simplest one, which is asking for a species count based on region. What we're going to do is utilize the APIs that the IUCN has available to give a little more information about a particular species. They've got these buttons so they trigger a call out to the API to find out the number of threatened species. So we're going to expand on that. Since these buttons are already taken for giving us a count of threatened species, we'll use these circles up here on the map. Currently, these don't actually do anything, so there's no code behind them. We're going to add code so that when we click on this, we'll actually jump to another screen, and then we'll have a different interaction with the API. So let's start with that. So here's the current code from the existing app. If we look on the map, these are all the different circles. Circle Europe, North Africa, Mediterranean, Central Africa. I'm not sure what Circle Country does, but Circle Global is the big blue one on the map, which means pretty much represents the entire world. So let's go to the map again and let's pull out, say, Circle Europe. And we'll say when you click on Circle Europe, if we go back to the regions, region list. So for instance here, Europe, right? So the name is Europe and the identifier is Europe. So when the user clicks on this, we want another screen to open up. So let's add a new screen now. I'm going to call it region screen. So it's going to be based upon a region. So for now, we just have the screen. It's an empty screen at this point. But let's go back to the map. And what we can do is when they click on this, we will open a new screen. So let's say open another screen, and we want to pass it which region has been clicked. So the screen we're going to open is the region screen, and the start value, I'm going to use the identifier, which in this case is the lowercase Europe, to make it easy for calling the API. So we'll just say Europe. And I can then duplicate this and do it for the other Central Africa. And so Central Africa is Central_Africa. I'll copy that. And then we can do that for the rest of them. So I'm going to quickly do that. Now I have all of my circles covered, and we're not going to do country. So we've got all 5 of our potential circles that will trigger opening our other screen. So now we can go to the other screen. So let's go to the region screen, go to the designer. Just to save some time, I'm not going to go through building the designer, but I can run through what each part is. So at the top is a label, which is going to display the region. So this, when we open this up, remember we're choosing a region from the map and the map screen, and we'll display it here. These little boxes are just spacers, just to kind of push things away from each other, so they're just easier to read. We have a horizontal layout, which is our button arrangement, and we have a back button, which allows us to go back to the map screen. And then the Choose Another Animal button is, we're going to have a list of animals, and in order for us to go back and choose a different animal from the list, we'll be hiding this list. We need this button to show the list again. The user can choose a second animal from the list. This will become obvious once we start coding it. And then this information here is the species information, which is where we're going to display the information about a particular species. So the user will choose an animal from the list, and we'll go out to the IUCN API and display some information about that animal. Also, it's not visible, but this is going to be a spinner, which is like a list view, and this is where we're going to make this list of animals. So we're going to go out to the IUCN API based on a region, say, give me all the animals in this region that are threatened species. It will return a list. We'll allow the user to choose an animal on the list and then use the animal name to call the API again and say, please give us more detailed information about this particular species. So that's generally what we have. There are some extra things in here that we'll be adding later, just to cover what the general setup is here for components that we'll be using as we start coding. Let's go back to map and blocks, and I'm going to borrow a little bit of the code that Giovanna and Arlen did. So these 2 little functions or procedures I think might come in handy. Let's go back here and we can drag these out. These are local variables, but I think I'm going to make them global. So I'm going to call this IUCN token, and I'm going to make it this. Now this is the API token, or it's like a key that you can get from the IUCN website. And I'm also going to do this IUCN, which is the start of the API call. So this is the general API call that you make, and then you add some parameters at the end depending on what you're looking for. And see, you have to build it by joining some of these things together. So what we're going to do is take this out of here. That I don't need. And down here, we're going to change this to the global that I just made for the token. We're going to be filling in some information here to change this a little bit. Let's call this, however, build IUCN species list URL. It's kind of a long name, but that's what we're doing. We're building an API call that will give us a list of the species for a particular region. Don't think we'll need this at all, so I'm just going to delete that. So let's start with what happens if we go back to the map. Remember, if they click on one of these circles, we're going to open the region screen and pass it the region name. So let's go back to the region screen. And so when the screen initializes, that's what we want to do. So we've got label 1, and I'm actually going to rename it region label. So I'll say set the region label text. 2, and under control, we get a start value. So the start value is what gets passed from another screen here. I'm also going to make a local variable or a global variable, but it's only global to within the screen. So we're going to call this region. I'll initialize it to blank, but then we can set it here to the start value. So we've saved it because we're going to use this in a few other places. So what will happen in the designer is this will get replaced with whatever the region name is. Let's fill in the back button. That's an easy one. So when the back button's called, we can just close the screen. This, because it's been called from the map, it will close this screen and the map screen will be behind it. So it will just go back to the map screen. And then we'll take care of the another animal button once we've programmed what's going to happen. In addition to displaying the region, we want to call the API. And before I forget, in some of these regions, some of them have this underscore in them. They also aren't capitalized, but we're going to at least get rid of the underscore. So what I can do is say replace all text. So this is just in the label. The region we're going to need for calling it in the API. So we're going to say replace all text and start value. And I'll duplicate that. So we're going to replace a underscore with a space. So I'll type in a space there. So that will just make it look a little nicer. At this point, we also want to call this IUCN API. So we come over here to the IUCN Red List, the API documentation. And if we go up here, it gives you species by country, and we're doing it by regions, right? So it asks you to give the region list. This is the format of the API call, and it's going to give you lots and lots of records. Look, 10,000 records. It's multiple pages. Let's look at an example. And I want this one, the European species list with paging. So this will say, for the region of Europe, give me all the species that are endangered. Notice that this is saying page 0, and there'll be 10,000 in this page, and then there's more pages. So there's a lot of animals. So you get all sorts of information here, and what I want to pull out is the scientific name, and then also this main common name. In this case, they don't have one for it. But like here, Orid belvica. So some of them have common names, and some of them don't. I feel like we want to at least try to display the common names, but if there isn't a common name, we'll use the scientific name. So let's first build that. Let's go back, and it asks us to do species, region, and then this would be where like something like Europe would go in. We're only going to grab page 0. We're going to grab, I think, maybe like the top 50 animals, just so that we can limit it to a number. And then, of course, our token. So we can go back here, and we have this, and then we need another text box, which is going to be the prefix ends in a slash. So then it's going to be species / region / and I'm going to add another string in here, which will be the region. Okay, the join block was giving me a bit of trouble, so I had to kind of rebuild this because it was acting kind of flaky, but this is the way it goes. We've got the prefix, which is our prefix up here. We're appending the word species and a slash and region and a slash, and then we're inserting the region. So for instance, if it's Europe, the word Europe will be in there. And then we are inserting page 0 because we only want the first 10,000. So if there's more than 10,000, we don't want to see them. And in fact, we're only going to take a small portion of that, and then we're giving it our token here. So this is going to build that string that will then become our URL that we're going to call. So we need to go to our, oh, and I haven't added that, so let me add that. We need an API, so we need connectivity and a web. And let's call this IUCN API. Let's go to blocks, and now we will be able to set the URL. So we say set the IUCN URL to, and that's going to be this. So it will be our procedure that we're calling here. And we don't need an operation anymore, so we're going to take that out as a parameter to that. So it's just simply calling this. It's going to build this with a join and return it. So we're setting the URL, and then the next thing we want to do is do a get. So this will go and get the information from the IUCN website. Whenever you do a get, it will trigger a got text. So it goes out, asks for the information, and this actually does take a little bit of time. We just have to wait for it to come back, and it will come back with, as we showed here, a big long list. These are keys, so this is going to be JSON. These are considered keys, and these are values. So we've got keys that are count, region identifier, page, and result. So the result is what we're really looking for. And then the square bracket designates that what we're getting for result, the value will be a list. And the list is a list of animals. And then each animal is itself then a dictionary, which is a bunch of keys and values, keys and values. Let's go back and see if we can pull out that information. So let's start off with some local variables, and we can do that with this initialized local. And let's start with JSON. So we want to pull out the JSON. Now let's actually call this a JSON list, because it is actually going to be a list that we're going to get. From the IUCN, we can say, take the JSON text, which will be our response content, and turn it into a dictionary. So we know that this is what we're going to get as a dictionary, and we want this particular key, the result. We're going to take that, and we're going to say then, go up to dictionaries, get value for key, and the dictionary is going to be this, which has been decoded, and then we want to say, give us the value for the result key. And what we can do is initialize our JSON list to that. We can collapse that for now. The next thing we want to do is we've got this spinner, and I want to fill in the spinner with the names of all these animals. First thing I'm going to do is set the spinner visible to true. So my idea is that when you first come in, the spinner will be invisible. We'll hide it. So we're going to set it to true and set the spinner's elements. Let's go to spinner elements 2 and pull all that information out by looking through this list. Now this is going to take a bit of doing. I'm going to make another procedure to do this. Let's do this as a result so we can then pop it in here. So let's call this build animal list. And let's say what we want to pass it is the JSON list. We can call it something different, but we're basically going to pass it the JSON list from up here. And let's, in here, make our own local variable. We need to have it snap in there. So let's call this animal list. And we'll start it off as an empty list. And then we need to basically loop through this list. So this is a list, and each one of those inside of it is going to be a dictionary. To do a for loop, we have to again find one that has the plug in it. So we actually need this do to allow us to now have a for loop. And we're going to say for each item in the list, and our list is going to be the JSON list. And what we want to do is add a new animal to the list. What we're going to add it to is the animal list. And what are we going to add? Well, we want to add not the entire, this whole thing, right? We're going to pull out these two things, the scientific name and the common name. So we're going to need a join. So we're going to, the thing, and hopefully let's see if join will work for us. So we're going to need 3 things. So we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 things. So we'll add 4 to the string. And the first thing will be, we're going to say get value for key, and the key for the first one is this main common name, and the dictionary is going to be the item. So each item in our JSON list is actually a dictionary itself. And then we'll add, let's be careful with this join, a space and a parentheses. And I'm going to put the scientific name in parentheses. So let's duplicate this. but instead of main common name, we want scientific name. And then we want to add the closing parentheses. So this should give us, for each item added to the list, it will be the common name, then a space, and then parentheses, inside parentheses, the scientific name. We have this issue here where we're getting some nulls here. If it's null, we don't want the word null to show up. What we need is an if statement, and I'm going to see that this works here. Nope, nope, nope. If this equals the word null, then I just want to give it a blank, so nothing. So all we'll see is the parentheses and the scientific name. Otherwise, we'll put that in here. See if we can move this up without causing issues, and I'll remove that. Okay. So just to review, we're saying if we have a null here for the main common name, we're just going to put a blank. Otherwise, we're going to put the actual common name that shows, and then put a space and a parentheses and the scientific name. So this will go through, and for each one of the animals, we're going to add the animal. Now, this is going to give us a list of 10,000. And quite frankly, I don't want 10,000 animals. Let's go back to control and say, for each, we'll change this to count, from 1 to, and let's just make this 50. And instead of just animal list from item, the dictionary will be index and list. So what I can say is, let's add an initialize item, select list item. So the list will be the animal list, I'm sorry, the JSON list, and the index will be our count, right? So now we can say, use the word item. So that was a little bit different way of doing it. I don't want to have 10,000 in my list. I'm just going to go from 1 to 50, and we'll pull out each item from the list by using the select list item. And then that's pulling it out of the JSON list, and we're creating this animal list. So in the end, we should have a list of 50 animals, and we'll say the result will be that. And so then what we can do up here is say call build animal list, and we're going to send it this JSON list that we have. What I'd like to do is to try to run this. Despite the fact we have screen 1, which has a login and all that, I'm going to jump to the map and start from there. So I'm going to connect to my emulator so we can see it running here. This is an old app I was working on. So it should open it up with the map. All right, so finally it showed up, and now what we can do is, I believe this kind of gold circle is Europe, so let's click on it. Oh, not found. Oh, so it looks like it didn't find the animal, so let's make sure. I'm going to use the, right now the species information as a label, so I'm going to say, let's just look at what it builds for the IUCN API. Make sure we're getting the right one there. Okay, IUCN species region Europe paid 0 token equals. Oh, token equal didn't. I don't have the token. That's a problem. All right, so let's go back to our build of this. Strange. Okay, this may be part of my join weirdness. So let me go back and do another join. Let's see if that does what we need it to do. So now my token's in there. So let's try this again. And let's do that, then do that. I'm using these do it blocks because they allow you to run what you need it to. And now you can see I've got my list here of all of so I've got 50. Some of them note that they just got the scientific name in parentheses, and some have the common name as well. So that's a good first step. So just once again, do it is a really good way to debug your program. So if you want to just run a piece of your code, once you're connected to your emulator or to your phone and you're testing, you can just run pieces of code and kind of force things to happen. So I'm happy with that. I've got this finally working. So once the user picks a species, we want to print out some information about that species. Now back here, if we go back, we want this narrative. So let's do this one. So they give you some information, and this is a little weird because it's got this Unicode stuff in here, but essentially it's giving you the rationale for why it's on the endangered list, and then it gives you some other things, geographic range, habitat, etc. I thought it would be good to pull the rationale out. Back here, we're going to call our API to give us the species list, then let the user pick a species on the list, call the API a second time to get this narrative. So I'm going to collapse this for now just to make some space. And we want to go to our spinner and say after the user has selected an animal on the list, we want to build a new URL that's going to look a little bit different than this one, right? So I'm going to duplicate this. And I'll just call it just species. So we're not building a whole list of species, we're just focusing on one. And this one is going to say, and what we want to do is we want to pass it the animal, right? The particular animal that we want information on. And this one, if you go back to it, it's species narrative, a single one. So it's species narrative and then the name of the animal. And they want the scientific name. That's why we had to have that. In this case, we will say narrative and, species narrative. And this is, we don't need this page thing in here anymore. The magic thing is we want this to be the scientific name of the animal. So what do we have in our list, however? We've got a name, parentheses, and this inside the parentheses is really what we want. So what we want to do is pull things out from the parentheses. So we're going to do something a little bit tricky, which is there's this thing called split at. So if we say split our animal, and if we split it at the first parentheses, what this does is it gives you a list of the text. Anywhere there's an open parentheses, it will split it. So in this case, because we know there's only ever one, it's going to give us a list with two items. The first item will be this name, and the second item will be scientific name, but including that closing parentheses. We say we want the second half of this, so we're going to say select list item here, and we want the second half of it. And then we're going to do it again, and we're going to split it at and this will be, takes that as our new set of text, and we're going to split it at this. And this part we want the first half. And then we want another select list item. So we're going to do a select list item, and this is what we want here. And in this case, we want the first one because it's going to split it at the closing parentheses. So this is a little funky way of doing it, but it should work. Hopefully this works. The joins are acting kind of funky. We're doing the prefix, species narrative. We're inserting the scientific name and then followed by the token. So this is going to build the species URL for the animal. So what we want is now to change our URL and set it to building. This is our new function. And the animal is the selection, which we're going to pass it the entire string. It's going to break it up, get just the scientific name, and then we can do another get. Remember, after you do a get, it's going to come to God text, but we've already got this code in here for the case of the list. So let's look again at what we get. So in this case, we get a name and a result. And if you go, remember back up to our species by country, we get different keys here. We get count, page, and result. So what we can say, if we get something that's got a name in it, it's the result of this get, but if it's got other ones like count, etc., it's this one. So all we have to do is, in the get, make sure we're looking at the right result. So one thing we can do is here add another variable, call it keys. I'm going to say, tell me all the keys that come back in this. So we go dictionaries, get keys. And the keys we want is this again. So in the keys that we get from here, we then want to check if one of the keys in there is name in the key list, then we know it's the animal. We're looking for the narrative about the animal. Otherwise, it's the one that's asking it to build the list. So in this case, if it's the animal, let's set this to false. We want to hide our list. Make the species information visible, which means that in this case we want to set this to false, right? And then the next thing we want to do is display it. So let's go back again. And if you look here, the result is also a list, but there's only one item in the list. We have to treat it as a list, but then within that we can see, again, we've got a dictionary because we've got a bunch of keys and values. If that's the case, well, let's set the species information text to, it's the same thing. We've got a result and it's a list, but we know in this case there's only one item in the list. So we're going to pull that out of the list by using that select list item. And the list item is going to be our JSON list. And the index will be 1. We only ever have one item because it's looking at one animal. And then, now that we've got the first item, we know that it's giving us a dictionary, right? And we want to get this rationale. So now we'll go to the dictionaries and say, value for key, and the dictionary is this, and the key is going to be rationale. So let's see if we still got our thing going here. So if I close this, okay, and we get the information back about the stellate sturgeon. Looking at it, you can see there's a little bit of HTML in there. And here's where the case of I need to be able to get back to my list, right? So I want to choose another animal. So if I click this button, choose another animal, what I want is this to disappear and my list to come back up. Let's do that. So let's go back to another animal button. And in that case, we want to basically duplicate this. This becomes visible. And this becomes false again, right? So let's go back and see if we can choose another animal. And we get back to our list. So let's try Adriatic sturgeon. And again, we've got some HTML in there, which is a little funky, so we need to do a little bit of formatting to fix this up, but otherwise I think we're pretty good. So what we need to do is write a little bit of a formatting that will eliminate that for us. If you're looking at this, it's kind of hard to understand some of this. So this is written kind of more for a scientific audience, and what we want to do is bring this down to the audience of a whatever age the person happens to be. So that's going to be our next step. Well, first step is formatting this so we can get rid of the HTML. Then we're going to use the ChatBot feature in App Inventor to go out and send this text to our ChatBot and have it return text that's more accessible for a younger audience. So what we will do is actually ask the user to tell us their age so we can tailor it specifically for them. Those are the next steps. Because the species information was coming out with a lot of this HTML in there, and as well I've tried some other ones where it has Unicode. So what I've done is make this little procedure that will fix that, and I'll just expand it to kind of go through. So what I did is I pulled out all these Unicodes to turn them into less thans and greater thans, and then I go through and I just remove anything between those two. So I'm removing all Unicode and HTML by doing this. I'll just collapse that. Then go to procedures and say format string, and that's what we're going to, right here it is. So here I'm going to grab the value from the key rationale, and then I format what that is. and then that's going to eliminate those things for me. And then let's move on to the kind of the gist of this. I'm going to add a ChatBot feature. Let me just connect again. So let me go again to Europe. Come back here. This is my debugging here, so we do have to get rid of that. Okay, there we go. And let me just choose I don't know if this is the one I chose before, but now you look at any excess HTML, or we do have a couple of things that's less than 50%. I think this is going to be any random extra things in there at this point we can take care of with the chatbot. So next step is to go back and add that. So the chatbot is under experimental, and we're going to add, yep, and they tell us it's a experimental feature. We're just going to use the default. So if you want, you can create your own account under ChatGPT and get an API key, etc. But if we just use the App Inventor default, we can use that. This will suffice for our needs at this point. And what I will do is, do I have a notifier here? Okay, I will add a notifier because I'm going to ask the user to input their age. When we are initializing the screen, I am going to ask, using the notifier, show text dialog. This was just my debug from before, so I'm going to just make that blank. All right, and we don't want to go out and get yet because we want to first find out some information. So I'm going to do this, show the text dialog, and I'm going to so let's just say welcome, and then say to give you a more tailored response from IUCN, can you please tell us your age? Okay, so this will bring up a text dialog box. It will ask them to input their age, and then from notifier we can say after text input, and it will give us the response. And that's where we can then start getting. We want to save that response though, so I'm going to make a variable called age, and let's just make it, let's say 10 as a default. And if I just want to make sure that they input a number, and I think it's might be in math. Yeah, is number. So if is number what they type in. So if they type in words, I don't want to use that, but I will then say if the response is a number, then I will set the age to whatever they've typed in. Okay, so that saves that information. The next thing we want to do is, instead of putting this into the species information, I'm going to save that in the variable initialize. So I'll call this original text. I'll initialize it to just blank. And then I will here set original text to this. And then we want to go to the chatbot, and we want the chatbot to give us this in more age-appropriate language. I will say, let's see, converse. And the question will be, and I'll probably need to put the age in there. Can you rewrite the following paragraph to be understandable by someone of the age? And then we can add in age. More there. A colon. and space, and then what I want them to rephrase is the original text. And then this will happen when the chatbot comes back. So chatbot, and when I've got a response, I'm going to set this to the response text. Okay, let's try again then. If I want to look at stellate sturgeon, let's try the chatbot. Maybe try Gemini. That's because this is shared amongst App Inventor users, so apparently we've used our allotment. Let's try this again. Oh, here we go. So let's say my age is 6. Choose another animal. Okay, and because we're refreshing, I'm going to go back to the map so we can get our region back. So let's go back to Europe, and I'll say I'm 6 years old, and we're going to have to wait. Because there's such a lag here with getting the original list of animals, I'm going to also add in the little spinner that tells us that things are working. So let's try Russian sturgeon. Okay, so this looks more age appropriate. Once upon a time, there was a very special fish, so that sounds pretty good for a 6-year-old. If I choose another animal, I can say this long-tailed field mouse. The fish is very common and lives in many different places. Notice that the old one was hanging around, so let's make sure that each time I select, after selecting, I reset the information to blank. So let's do that so that doesn't get confusing. And then I also mentioned I wanted to have the circular progress, and that is, where can I put that? I would probably put that here. And let's make sure our screen is centered, so it's in the center. So this whole thing to be like a spinner, so you know you're waiting for something and you're not like, what's going on? So let's make that originally invisible, and then the places we'll have to is right when we're doing a get. So let's say set circular progress visible to true. Let's duplicate that. So that's when they've chosen animal, but also we want to do it up here, right? And I think there's an issue with the theme. The project, the theme has to be non-classic in order for that circular progress to work. The default is classic, but I'm just going to say device default. I'm just going to refresh that. And now if we go back here, and let's go back to map. All right, let's try again the emulator. There it goes. We are back here at the map. Let's try a different region. So let's go to Northern Africa, and let's say we're 10 years old. Okay, now we've got the circular progress. So now you know you're waiting for something, and now we've got our list. Okay, and we're not turning it off, so we need to turn that off, right? So when we've got a got text, let's do circular progress visible to, let's say, false. And we'll do that right now. So let's say do it so it gets turned off. Yeah, now but we can see that it does it again. All right, let's choose this killfish. That looks pretty good for a 10-year-old. Let's choose another animal. Let's do blue emperor. Okay, meet an X and a dragonfly. Good. I don't know why we're not getting that. Maybe it's coming in quick enough. Let's make sure that it's after text input. Yeah, that's circular progress to 2. Okay, let's go back and just one more time. I want to make sure if I go back to the map and let's try Africa and let's do a 12-year-old at this point. Okay, so that did disappear for us. So if I do this animal, okay, it's a type of snail. Again, looks like it's pretty well rephrased for that age group. Okay, so there is an example of using a chatbot to make your app more accessible by asking the chatbot to rephrase some information to make it more age appropriate for the user. So what other ways do you think you could use a chatbot in your app? Give it a shot.